the show recording.
You're listening to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge.
Hello and welcome to eLearnChat, our new podcast featuring prominent leaders, shakers and movers in the e-learning and training industry. Your co-hosts are Rick Zanotti and Terrence Wing. And hello everybody and welcome to our second episode of eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. Today I'm joined by our co-host, Terrence Wing. Terrence, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Rick. I'm excited about our guest, too.
I sure am, too. And here we have our very first guest. This is Bill Cushard from Self-Made Leaders. Bill, how are you today?
I am super. I am very excited also to be numero uno. Thank you.
So is our audience. And for all of you who are out there in the audience watching the live stream, you can go to justin.tv/RelateCorp, RelateCorp, and join the chat there. Or you can go to Twitter and just do a search on hashtag eLearnChat, ELEARNCHAT. And Terrence is monitoring the chat. And anybody on right now, Terrence?
Not in the chat window, but I would say if you are watching the show on justin.tv and you're using the chat room on that site, please introduce yourself to us so that we know you're in the chat room. It looked like we had one person in there earlier, and they're not really using a name I can decipher here, but it looks like RICAS. And if you look into the chat window, you can probably see it there.
Rikas. I've seen him on Twitter. He's one of the people I've chatted with.
Oh, great. Great.
Well,
and Lily is trying her hardest to participate in the chat, but for some reason she's having a little bit of trouble, but she's out there as well, and she joined us last week too.
Well, today our show's focus is going to be on leadership, and it's a word that's thrown out a lot. You know, who's a leader? What's a leader? What makes a good leader? How do you become a leader? Are you a born leader? Do you learn how to become a leader? Do you have no clue and you just fall into it? And to sort out some of those questions and issues, Bill will be talking to us. Bill does a lot of leadership training. And Bill, tell us a little bit about what your company does. I love the name of your company, as we talked about earlier in the pre-show. Self-Made Leaders. That is such a great way to talk about leadership. How'd you come about that name?
Well, you know, it started with, it's a funny story. I was a young, inexperienced, budding training manager, and the head of customer service needed help with all the new supervisors she was promoting and asked if I could help do something about that. So I started organizing some classes and some discussions about leadership, and HR got wind of it. It's a funny story, and summoned me to their office and said, this is not an approved leadership program, and the executive team is working on a plan to deliver something that's official and that I shouldn't be doing this. And I responded by saying, well, I'm doing it. So thanks for the meeting. And over several meetings like this, I finally just said, you know what, I'm just doing a book club, guys. So I'm fine. As soon as you guys have your program, we'll be happy to take it. I'll be the first to sign up, the whole team. And it was an experience for me that, I'm not going to wait around for some leadership development program. They hardly ever come. They're expensive to deliver. It's hard to prove that they work. And so we were just, a bunch of managers in a room trying to figure out how to be better managers and learning from each other. And we were reading books and doing exercises. And that's sort of how this all started. And over the years, it occurred to me that I never attended any official leadership development programs. And I managed to become, leaders of teams throughout my career. So just simply by reading books and practicing things and trying things and making mistakes. And that's how the self-made leader really came about, even though we just sort of created this in recent weeks. And that's sort of where the name comes from. You can do it yourself.
Oh, so this is something new for you.
It is very new.
Oh, that's great. Well,
yes.
Congratulations and success on this launch.
Yes, thank you. Pretty exciting.
Well, it's interesting because I firmly believe that most leaders are accidental leaders. They kind of fall into it. Somebody says, here, do this. And the first thing you think is, how do I do this? What do I do? Okay, you're just under the firing line. If you look at the military has a lot of leadership programs. And if you're being shot, you learn how to be a leader real quickly. You either get shot or you run or you lead. What's the old saying? Either lead or get out of the way. Lead, right. Follow, or get out of the way?
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
And to a certain point, I think that's probably applicable in the business world. What did you find as your experience when you got thrown into a leadership position? How did you first cope?
Well, as I often do, I go out and I try to find a book on the subject and learn at least a few things from some paragraph somewhere in there about what I should do. I'm a little bit nerdy that way, I suppose, but that's the first thing I did. And I figured, well, gosh, my peers or other people in the company where I work then could learn from this stuff too, because, you walk down the hall and you hear examples of all the wrong ways of doing things, me included. I just figured we got to get some of these people in a room and figure out the right way to do it. So I guess it was I was self-made in the sense that I just started reading books, and, not all books are good, and some are good and some are better than others. And you just learn one or two things from it. My advice from my father, if you learn one thing from something you read, it was worth it. So that's how I approach it. If I can learn one thing, and now in my role, if I could, deliver that one message to somebody else, or at least inspire someone else to, learn one thing from something they read, then I think I've, done my job.
And you got the ding of approval on that one. So.
Yeah, and it looks like Ray Deese out of Canada agrees with you. And what resonated based on his tweet is that you started out or the group started out from just reading books. Great way it wasn't this amazing technological advance that brought people together. It was something as simple as somebody wrote an idea, and that idea expanded into something bigger.
And what's interesting about a lot of the leadership books is that half of them are written by people who you really wonder if they've ever been a leader, because there's a lot of theory in it, but the reality isn't always the same. It's not as easy to apply.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the best books I've read on leadership actually were military books. There's one book, and I can't remember the name of the author, but it was called The Best Damn Ship in the Navy. It's a great leadership, a very small book. It's only probably 130, 40 pages. And he talks about his leadership role in the Navy when they first made him a captain, and how he ticked off the whole fleet command because he started becoming friendly with his people. What an innovative concept. The people not only respected him, but he respected them back. And the Navy not always being the most open-minded or probably the most fragmented when it comes to leadership and troops, there really is a margin or a separator between them. And he actually broke that and had probably one of the best ships in the Navy, with people wanting to transfer onto that ship pretty badly. So that's a good thing. And like he said, he learned his experience really by just using common sense, talking to people, and trying to figure out what made them tick so that he could better manage them, lead them, if you will. And I think also a thing, what do you think about this, Bill? A lot of times I think leadership, is it really leadership, or is it just good people skills, good management? When is it leadership and when is it just simple management, or are the two the same?
I think it is people skills primarily, because you have to be able to relate to people, be interested in them, and I think those kinds of things inspire people to want to follow you. Of course, there's always coercion, and if you're the boss, you can always say, do it or else. And that can work, and that...
Uh-oh, there goes that audience again.
I mean, that can work temporarily, but, in the long term, if you're not interested in people and know how to relate to them, it's hard to keep them motivated.
It's true, and I found I've been in quote-unquote management for a long time, and I found that as long as you're upfront, honest with people, talk to them, and communicate, for the most part, everybody seems to be fairly happy. And also, I think being clear at what the objectives are. A lot of times, things are just sort of out in the air, floating, and nobody really knows what they're supposed to do. Do you find that, Terrence, when you do your assignments or work with people, that sometimes nobody really knows what the task is?
Well, absolutely. I think there's all kinds of different environments that a leader can surface in, whether it's a period of corporate malaise where there's nothing happening and people are just stuck in this routine and they're just going about their day the same way they did yesterday. Well, a leader is going to recognize that malaise and the danger of that malaise, and they're going to step up. And then you have adversity, and a leader is going to recognize when there's an obstacle in the way and the obstacle has potential damaging effects on the organization or the team that they're leading. So I think there's a lot of different environments that are going to stimulate a leader to act. And I also think that in some cases, some leaders may flourish in certain environments like adversity, but then when you put them in an environment like malaise.
I think we're slowing down a little bit on the feed. I think we're having a little bit of a Skype issue on Terrence's line. Let's go back to him. Oh. Terrence, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I think your Skype took a little bit of a clip for a second.
No, sorry about that.
You're good.
I'd like to make a point about the expectations. I don't know where I read it, but when you said that, Rick, I remember reading that one of the top, 2 or 3 things that leaders don't do well, that demotivate the most, is not setting clear expectations. If people don't know what is expected of them, they flounder and they try to figure out for themselves. And if a leader or a manager or a boss can set clear expectations, that's got to be, and I'm no scientist, but that's got to be 60, 70, or 80% of the challenge of motivating people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of leadership is just common sense. It's learning. When I grew up, leadership was more, you will do this or we will kill you. And it was a different kind of leadership environment. I remember my first jobs, I worked at Citibank, probably one of the most hated jobs I had. And that was in a different culture back when. That was the late 70s. And leadership was, you don't question, you do. Well, of course, nobody's motivated. Nobody cares. Everybody looks miserable. And it was just a different world. And then as slowly better management techniques emerged and people started communicating a little bit better with the teams and realizing that, we're kind of all in the same boat. And if we're not all rowing in the same direction, we're going to have a problem. And so that was a good change that, we started going away from that, though you still find a lot of that depending on what industries you're in. You probably don't find it as much as you used to.
Looks like we have a question here from Lily, and she's asking, isn't leadership something that is natural to some people? So we'll let you answer that, Bill.
Oh, I definitely think so. And although I do believe it can be learned, but if you think back to high school or junior high, all the cliques of people that were there, in all of those circles, there was 1 or 2 kids who were just the leader of the group, and they were the ones that organized all the parties and the going to the mall and to where we were going to meet before class. There's always 1 or 2 people there, and they never took a leadership class. They never read a book on it. I guarantee you that. So yes, I think it does natural to some people, but if you don't have that inclination, you can learn it. It's just a matter of doing it. The skill of leadership is no different than the skill of engineering or medicine or being an auto mechanic. I can't take apart a carburetor. I don't even know wouldn't even know where to start or even what one looks like. But I bet if I studied hard enough for enough time, I could. So, no different.
Yeah.
I tried it once. My car never worked again. So, just
I would not try.
I actually tried. Never again.
And Lily's bringing up a point here too, that and if I'm reading into this right, Lily, you're saying that there are still those that are born to be leaders. And Bill, I was wondering what your thoughts would be on that. That if, is it really based on what you're finding that leaders have to be born with that trait, or can it be that somebody is not looked at as a leader today, but something changes in their life and suddenly they step up into that role and become an exceptional leader?
Yeah, it's the debate. Are you born to it or can you learn it in anything, right? And so I like to point out a basketball player named Muggsy Bogues. He's 5'3" and played in the NBA for 10 or 12 years. So I asked people, was that person born to play in professional basketball at 5'3"? I doubt it. So I don't fall in the school of the born to. I fall in the school of you learn it. And the trait is not leadership. The trait is some kind of internal drive to want to learn how to do it and stick with it. And instead of drinking a beer or sleeping in or reading a comic book, you thought about or learned how to be in charge or be a leader of some kind. I just think that it's the trait is the drive to want to do it, not leadership.
And it's interesting. There is a certain amount that I think a very small group of people out there are probably born leaders, where they have a natural tendency or too much testosterone to just naturally want to lead or and maybe the word's not even lead. They're just people who like to be in charge, and they have a tendency to just easily oscillate towards I'm on top and I'm in charge. There aren't that many of them who really go into that, especially in the business world or in academia or wherever you are. It's hard to find that natural, quote unquote, born leader. Like you said, most of them are probably self-taught. They're made. They learn along the way. They learn through experience. And that's another thing. I think we discount experience a lot. How long does it take to become a leader?
Yeah, I would say, I would think many people who are leaders would probably say, I'm still trying to figure it out. And I've been a boss for 10 years or whatever. So I think it's sort of a continuous process, especially in startup companies. We've hired 100 people this year. Okay, make those 4 people managers because they're the sort of the smartest and best at what they do, and go, right? And so some of them will succeed because they'll figure it out as they go, that experience thing, and others would not do well and would just rather be the individual contributor. It suits their personality more.
That's so true. And I remember we've had people that we've hired where we said, okay, it looks like you've got some potential. You put them in a management role and they're panicking. They hate it. They don't want to be managers. They don't want to manage other people. We had one gal a long time ago who said, I don't want to be this close to the top. I hate the top. So, you never know. You go through, everybody's different. And it's part of that's trying to figure out, okay, who wants to be a leader or who wants to assume a management position? And then what do you do with them? How do you train them or how do you, and actually that's another word that comes in. And I think this is one that Terrence talks about a lot. That's mentoring. How do you mentor somebody to be a leader?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think that the person who is a mentor is probably a leader of some kind. And the mentor, even if they're not a boss of anybody else, they're certainly a leader for a mentee just by default, because the mentee is coming for advice and guidance. I think, the mentor needs to sort of challenge the mentee to try new things and go outside their comfort zone and to, do a lot of question asking and not so much telling. This is the way you be a leader. As in most things in life, we have to sort of self-discover it, make our own mistakes. And we don't hear anybody when they tell us what to do until we make our own mistake, right? Don't touch that oven. And of course we touch it and then we realize, I guess I shouldn't have touched it.
Would you say a leader has to have real good self-awareness skills?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a process of self-discovery. I mean, if I want to use a sort of a corny phrase, you have to sort of know who you are, what kind of manager you are, and what kind of, and where you should make changes or where you should stick to it and decide whether to make that decision or not. So, and I guess, all the PhDs and the scientists that are studying this topic, they all have built in these self-assessments into these leadership programs because they've discovered it's important for someone to sort of figure out who they are first before they can be a leader. I think so.
we have a few comments here in the chat window, a little bit of a discussion going on. And some of the comments were that good leaders are always learning to be better leaders. And I think that was something that you had said, Bill. And also there's an element of followership that takes place with leading too. And I guess that sort of goes with that servant leadership. But something else that's interesting, knowing a little background on some of the people that are posting into the comment window, is that there's a little bit of disagreement, but there's also some borders in that we have somebody from Germany, we have somebody from Canada, we have people from the U.S., and I'm wondering if their perspectives on leadership are different because of the different cultures in each of those countries.
Yeah, that would be a great question to post to the chat room, right? And see what kind of responses we get.
And that's a real good point, because I don't know if you folks have lived overseas. I've lived in several countries, and there are definite differences in leadership styles, in how people assume leadership and how the quote-unquote followers follow leadership. In the U.S., we tend to be not so leader-centric. Everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to kind of do their own thing. We're probably not the most respectful society. If you go to other societies, you're going to get much more of a hierarchical leadership kind of model, which is different from what we do here. There's a certain amount of hierarchy, but it's a little flatter. Have you guys been to other places where you've seen that?
I have not. Only visiting, not working.
Yeah.
But what comes to my mind is, if I'm a person, implementing and developing leadership programs in multiple cultures, I'm sweating bullets over figuring out how it should be different, what should be different, should it be different, and I think if there was a more prevalent tone of this leadership is sort of self-made and self-discovering, you'd have less of those problems, because people have, they take what they can from whatever programs offered and things they do and experiences they have, and they develop it themselves. I think that could be a way to overcome that, because gosh, how can you really address all those differences? It seems infinite to me.
That's true. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I'd like to touch upon, since we're covering a broad subject of leadership, one of my favorite subjects, not to be controversial, but politics.
Oh, no.
Have you ever wondered, we elect people, and this is non-party oriented, this is all parties. We're electing people to run a country who have absolutely no skill set in leadership. They have communication skills, sort of, and then a lot of them know how to lie really well, but they have no real communication skill sets. I mean, leadership skill sets. They've never run things. And this is across all party lines.
Sure.
We are hiring, or we are electing people you would never hire to do the same thing in real life. If you think about it.
Can you imagine the Congress shows up for their first week of orientation, which they do. They do an orientation when they get to Washington, all the new Congress people. Can you imagine them sitting in a week-long leadership development program and doing self-assessments and do role plays and offering feedback and practice sessions? What a trip that would be.
Yeah, most of them would be fired after their probationary period.
That's right. I mean, they're lawyers and policymakers, right? I mean, that's what they do.
Well, that's an issue too. And again, do lawyers run good companies? Not usually. You don't find too many lawyers running companies that aren't law firms. There are some exceptions, of course, but and that's the thing. You're putting up laws, but you're also managing, if you will. So I just find politics a macrocosm of everything else, and what a bad example of leadership that usually is. There's finger pointing. Everybody's doing, it's your fault. Everybody's just pointing fingers. Well, that's not management. It's definitely not leadership, and there's no teamwork going on. And it's just an interesting thing. And as we've seen it over the last probably 20 years of politics, it's not the most pleasant thing to watch. And the lack of leadership really shows when you have emergencies. We can say Katrina. We can say the oil spill. I mean, those are just typical examples of bureaucrats with no clues.
It reminds me of that Linda Hill's book. It's Becoming a Manager. It was her PhD dissertation. She writes about how companies promote the best person in the job to be the manager. And she followed stockbrokers and software engineers, I think. And they were promoting people based on how good they were at the job, not the potential to lead and all the challenges that these new leaders came. That's probably what we do too with the politicians. We think they're good legislators, or they would be, not good leaders, and so that's why we promote them by voting them. Just like the best lawyer becomes the partner, and the best software engineer becomes the IT director, and the on and on and on. Instead of looking for the people skills or the leadership potential, I tell my son that he needs to do two things. The advice I give him is, when you're going to college, go learn a skill. I don't care what it is: graphic design, business, finance, software engineering, writing. Learn a skill, and then learn people skills and leadership skills, and then you can do anything, right? So, but we don't promote people that way necessarily.
No, in fact, I don't know if this book is still taught or pushed in the colleges, but when I was in school back in the 70s, there was a book called The Peter Principle. People got promoted to their level of incompetence. And it's so true if you think about it. You're a very good engineer, so okay, hey, you're really a good engineer. Let's make you a manager. So now you've gotten rid of the good engineer. You've made him a mediocre manager. He's unhappy or she's unhappy. And so you have this perpetuating problem inside the corporation that we're promoting, not often because they're the right people to be promoted, but they're the only people who seem like, oh, look, that looks like a good person. Let's promote them. And not always a good way to promote somebody or to assure leadership.
Especially when that person can't let go of what they do well. They become a manager, but they still want to program the code, write the code.
Oh, I'm guilty.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And I got some advice a few years ago that when you become a manager, it's not about you anymore, right? It's about the team. And so it's just hard for a lot of us to sort of let go of what we know how to do well.
Well, you remember the old line, right? Management would be great if it weren't for the people.
People always get in the way.
They do.
Well, and because that's where that aspect of leadership jumps in. I always tell people that management is the process, or management is about managing process, where leadership is about inspiring people. So you can manage an account, you can manage, a piece of equipment, but you can't manage a person. You really have to lead a person in order to get them to the results that you want to get them. And when I say get them to achieve those results, I'm not talking about compliance. I'm talking about commitment. Compliance is when you tell somebody to do something, and when you're there, they do it because they're afraid of the consequences. Commitment is you don't need to tell them to do it because they know it's the right thing to do. They're engaged, and whether you're there or not, it's going to get done. So I think that's where you see the difference between management and leadership. Compliance is a byproduct of management, whereas commitment is a byproduct of leadership.
Can you say that again backwards?
It was hard enough saying it once, Ford. I'm a one-trick pony. When I say something, that's it. If you didn't catch it, I'm over.
You got a good ding on that one.
Outstanding.
So Bill, you have all this great background on leadership, some great insight on leadership, and you decided to go out on this venture to explore sort of a self-propelled process of discovery for leadership. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why wikispaces, why Self-Made Leaders Wiki came about?
Well, in a way, I'm sort of on a mission to convince people that they don't have to wait around for some program, and they can do it themselves and become a leader. And we have a quote from Harry Truman where he says, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. And so that's sort of the foundation of this. And it's a call out to anyone that wants to be a CEO of their own company, or a supervisor of customer service, or for that matter, someone who wants to lead a project at their church or a volunteer organization. A leader doesn't mean the CEO. A leader could just mean anyone that wants to, sort of lead something and get people to join in on some kind of a cause. And so it's a call out to prove and to debunk leadership development, frankly, that people can do it themselves. And it's an experiment because, I work for a startup company, the Nolan Group, and I can tell you that we're not going to be bringing in some fancy leadership development program to train our leaders. It's just not something we're going to spend our time or money on. And so this is also a way of figuring out, as we promote people as we're growing, how can we get people to become good leaders without the mess and hassle and expense and time of some program which we might not be able to prove worked,
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of reasons for doing this. And, my partner and I, Will Paco, he's out there somewhere in North Carolina. He and I sort of share this belief that, you don't wait for HR to tell you can't do it, because they will, because it hasn't been approved. You have to go out there and do it yourself, because you can't do it.
Well, HR is often the biggest obstacle to actual growth, because they tend to be the bureaucrats within the company rather than the ones who actually promote leadership or anything else. In fact, leadership often, I'm going to get HR people ticked at this, but they often...
Yeah, our audience is HR people, Rick.
Yes, and we do love you, actually.
I'm in HR.
Yeah. Yes. See, we love our HR people. But having been, my background's been in IT. I ran IT shops for a long time. So, of course, IT and HR tend to argue a lot, only because IT has one mission, which is the whole company. IT is looking at the whole company differently. So there was always that little push and pull of how you get things done. But IT often, now, not in all companies. In some companies, HR is actually quite a good organization. In some companies, HR is an obstacle to actually getting things done. And I think we've probably all encountered that from time to time. I know I've worked in several companies throughout my past that HR was really a hindrance to success or to people moving up versus actually getting things done.
Oh, yeah. And, when HR is about, making sure the policies are followed, then you probably are in a problem situation. But when you have an HR organization that's trying to enable the business, to achieve its goals, then you're probably in a position of potential success. That's what their role ought to be, I think.
Bill, you had made a statement that Lily's asking for some collaboration on. She's saying, what do you really mean by leaders or readers?
They're well, someone else made this comment too. A leader, another chat session I heard you say, Terrence, that leaders are always trying to figure out how to be better at it. So, a leader is constantly reading something new to get smarter about something. And, in some cases it is, a leadership development book written by a university professor that did research. Other times it could be an autobiography of a prominent world figure, but they're constantly reading. There are stories and stories of presidents who are readers. The last president, George W. Bush, read about a book a month or a book a week, I think. I read a Wall Street Journal article. These guys read all the time, and it's no joke they achieve high success in their fields. It's no mistake. So I'm constantly reading. I try to do a book every 2 weeks. But you can't, how can you get better at something unless you learn something new about it? And one way to do that is to read.
And one of the beauties about reading is you really do get other ideas, other influences, and it keeps you not only current on what's out there, but it also keeps you aware of things that other people are doing which may or may not have succeeded. So I think some of the best books are the ones I've read where people talk about their failures. And if we pay attention, it's a roadmap to how not to repeat the same problems. Toynbee said, history repeats itself. And we don't quite seem to learn that lesson. And as leaders, quote unquote, or managers, how do we avoid the same mistakes everybody else did? And you know what? You've got, I think you mentioned you have children, Bill, and there's one thing that's a given. There are no good parents, only survivors. Parenting's tough. And no matter what you think and you say, I'm going to do it right. I know everything wrong that my dad did, I'm going to do right. I am my dad. And you find yourself doing things that your parents did, or that you go, why did I do that? And part of it's imprinting. Part of it is, as quote unquote leaders, we're learning how to lead. So your point is perfectly made. Self-made leadership in parenting is probably 100% right on. It is what leadership as a parent is. You kind of learn as you go, and you talk to other parents, and you watch other kids, and you look at your kid, and you try to figure out what's right, what's wrong, what am I doing right, what am I doing wrong, and where do you go from there?
Yeah, and as a parent, I figure it out as I go. Of course, I did read a couple of books on the subject, and I even attended a daddy boot camp at the hospital when one of my children was born. So that I learned. So I try to do multiple ways of trying to figure out, how not to drop, the baby. One book I read was How to Keep Your Baby Alive Until Mommy Comes Home. So that was a fun book to read. But if you're not reading, how can you get smarter? And so, Lily, I would say go get your library card, because all these books are at the library and it's free. So I have my library card. I use it frequently.
But don't let Lily fool you. She's actually a genius. She's a college professor, an engineer, a very smart teacher when it comes to multimedia. She's actually really bright.
Oh, yeah.
She knows everything
cool.
we're talking about.
Oh, so she's just sort of egging us on. Is that it?
Yep, she's testing us. I think we failed,
okay.
but...
Yeah, I'm looking at her in the chat there too, and I think she's quite the antagonist in there. She's trying to stimulate some dialogue, and she's getting successful at it.
She's great. She's going to be a guest panelist pretty soon. We're going to actually put her on camera. I've been trying to get her on a webcam for ages, and I think she agreed. So it'll be fun to have some of her viewpoints, especially when she talks about passion. And that's another point. And this is to Lily's point that I've tweeted with many times. Passion. If as a leader you don't have any passion for what you're doing, you're going to be one pretty crappy leader, frankly. Any comments on that one?
Yeah, no doubt. Because if you're a leader and there are people who are following you, they will see it, right? And so if they think you are scared or demotivated or bored or uninterested, they will not respond to you. So yes, you have to really sort of care about what you're doing and just be into it. You want to jump out of bed every morning and take on the world and change things. A lot of people think leadership is just about, changing things and blowing things up and starting over and press on, even though everyone's telling you you can't or it shouldn't be done or we don't do it that way. And you have to put up a fight because, all new ideas were opposed, right?
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, in today's day and age, if you look at it in technology, anytime you come up with something new, everybody poo-poos it. You can't do that. That's no good. And imagine if everybody listened to common knowledge out there. Nothing would have ever gotten done.
I remember a phrase from a book where the guy is saying about every new idea was opposed, and he said that the man who invented fire, who brought it to his brothers, he was probably burned at the stake of the fire he provided. Right?
That'll teach him.
That's great.
Yeah. You don't bring that fire in here. You're crazy. That's heresy.
That's funny. Well, we're running towards the end of the show. Bill, I'm putting up your website right here.
And Bill, if I could ask you too, what made you decide to go with a wiki, since there are so many different vehicles for learning?
Well, first of all, it's easy to set up. That's one thing. And two, it enables other people to make changes. So one of the things we call for in this is that if you don't like one of the competencies of leadership that we have listed here, and you don't like one of the parts of the curriculum, well, then do something about it. You're a leader. Change it. All right? Don't call me, email me. I'm going to be at home going skiing. I'm not going to change it. You change it. You're the leader. So do something about it. That's sort of the idea behind using a wiki. It empowers people. It gives them a chance to be a leader. And it's easy to use, frankly. These things are really cool. You can just set up a website and it's done.
That's great. And we're going to put in the show notes the link to your wiki so that people can contact you and hopefully take the training or the untraining, like you call it, the uncourse, which
yes,
again, I love.
Yeah.
It's perfect. And again, we wish you a lot of success in that. And again, I thank you for being on today and sharing with us. And hopefully we have you on again, because we plan on doing a lot of these shows and just kind of a free-for-all comment. We'll have some direction in the shows, but I think this was a real good talk about leadership and what leadership is and what it isn't and what it can be.
It'd be great to, because I know you're at the beginning stages of of the Self-Made Leader Wiki. And it'd be great to bring you back at another time so that we can find out what worked and what didn't work and what changes you made, and was it as successful as you had hoped it would be, and sort of that after action review of your first phase of leaders that go through this.
Do you have any courses or classes coming up?
Yeah, our next round starts December 7th. The schedule is on the wiki, and it's their weekly 1-hour chats over a period of about 8 weeks, and we discuss. There will be several assignments and discussions throughout that time. So December 7th is the next one.
Okay, great. And on that note, on December 7th, I am teaching an audio class for Icon Logic on audio basics for e-learning. I'll post that up on Twitter. We hope you can make it to that as well. So if you're doing audio, you're probably not in the middle of doing leadership training, so I don't think we'll have any conflicts there in the middle of all that. But definitely do try to attend Bill's class, and I think you'll get probably a ton out of it. And just want to let everybody know that this show was sponsored by Liquid Learn, which is Terrence's company, and by Relate Corporation, which is my company. Both Terrence and I specialize in developing e-learning, training, leadership courses, and we are currently funding the show. And if you go to our eLearnChat.podbean.com, we'll post that out on Twitter as well. That's where we're actually hosting the real show. You can take a look at the previous shows, and if you are so inclined, you can help donate some money to help keep the show going, because we are completely self-funded on this, and it's been a bad economy for everybody. So
Sure.
Any donations are always welcome, thanked, and we will call you out as a donator and thank you very much. You don't have to. It's just only if you want to.
And something else that we should mention too, we are simulcasting this on the ISD 2.0 fan page on Facebook, sort of as an experiment. There are definitely some limits to that, but with this being an e-learning group, Rick and I want to tap into as many of the e-learning tools out there, and social media obviously is one of the most probably popular e-learning tools that are on the market right now. So if you want to see a demonstration of this in Facebook, you can always tune into that that site as well, and that's ISD as an Instructional Systems Design 2.0 fan page. And be sure to like the page so that you join the community. I think we're approaching about 130 fans at this point, so it's growing nicely.
I just liked it yesterday, so good times.
Yes, I saw that.
That's great. Well, our outro music is on. I think we're reaching pretty much the end of our show. And Bill Cushard from Self-Made Leaders, want to thank you for joining us today and helping out with the show and adding a lot of insight to it. This is at least 5 people. We love it. So anyway, thanks everyone. We will see you guys next week, same time, same place. And next week, Gina Schreck will be on. She is a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy her. Anyway, we'll see you guys next time. So this will conclude episode 2 of eLearnChat.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bill.
All right, thanks.